After the coronavirus began shutting down medical facilities and the government required us to stay at home, I began my seclusion from the world. On April 12th, I had to make one last journey to the hospital before beginning isolation. I had to go to the emergency department to get my midline pulled. I had the line inserted to receive IV antibiotics for an infection. But now the infection had cleared and I needed the line taken out. I quickly slipped in and out of the deserted emergency department. I then retreated to my home, not knowing when I would ever break quarantine and return back into the world. I could have never have imagined my re-entry into society would be such a grand adventure, which included an ambulance ride and a visit to the emergency department. Six weeks ago, I began having significant chest pain. I kept pushing off the pain and telling myself it was no big deal. Every day, the pain intensified. I soon realized this pain was not going away on its own. I called a medical facility to schedule an appointment to see a doctor. I was shocked when the receptionist said she could get me into an appointment in just 3 days. On the day of the appointment, I left my house, and now I was re-entering society. Although I'd been confined to my home for 3 months, it appeared as though the world was still the same. The crops were still growing, the livestock was still grazing, cars zoomed to and fro on the highway. Life seemed as though it had not changed. But when I arrived at the clinic, everything was different. It was a strange world I was seeing. Everyone was wearing masks. Everyone's speech was garbled by the barrier which separated their words from my ears. No one sat near each other. The waiting room was full, as it nearly always is. In a short while, I was called back to an exam room. As I traveled down the hallway, the medical staff all wore thick N95 masks. It was hard to tell who anyone was. When I arrived in the exam room, I was huffing and puffing. My chest was aching in pain. The nurse took my vitals. She then left and summoned the doctors. 2 doctors arrived in my room. I was asked some more questions about my chest pain. Neither doctor seemed very concerned about my complaints. The one doctor said they would have the nurse come and do an EKG. The doctor said they would return with the results. The nurse reappeared in my room with an EKG machine. I was quickly hooked up to the machine. An EKG was recorded. The nurse left. A short while later, both doctors returned. I was sure they were going to tell me everything was fine. I just needed to go home and stop complaining. But to my amazement, the doctor who sat down next to me had my EKG in his hand, and there were several things circled on it. The doctor said my EKG showed my right side of my heart was in distress and was failing. I asked, "What does this mean?" The doctor said it meant I had right-sided heart failure. This could be caused by several things, such as a pulmonary embolism or pulmonary hypertension. As the doctor said all this, his attitude was very relaxed. Then doctor number 2 jumped in. He asked if I was having any chest pain. I said yes, but it was less now that I was resting and not moving. Doctor number 2 said I needed to go to the emergency room right now to get evaluated. I needed to see a cardiologist and have a workup done. He went on to say since moving caused me such significant chest pain, I was not to travel to the hospital on my own. They were going to call the ambulance. I was taken aback by all this. 1 minute I just had chest pain. Now I have heart failure and need to go to the ER via the ambulance. It all seemed so surreal. I agreed to go to the hospital. An ambulance was called. I was given aspirin and nitroglycerin. Soon the EMS arrived. I was helped onto a stretcher. As we made our way from the clinic to the hospital, the nitroglycerin started to work. Suddenly, the pain in my chest, neck, jaw, shoulder, back, and arm all disappeared. I had a surge of energy and felt great. When we entered the ER, it was like entering a war zone. All the medical personnel had on 2 masks. They had on an N95 mask, which was covered by a surgical mask. Many had on hairnets, shoe coverings, plastic face shields, and plastic gowns. Some doctors had on big, bulky respirators. I felt as though I was in the middle of a science fiction movie. Quickly, I had a room in the very full emergency department. Tests were run. Nothing abnormal came up in my blood work. I had 3 more EKGs done. All showed the exact same abnormalities. The emergency department doctor said I could go home, and I should follow up with my doctor if I had any more chest pain. I was happy to go home, but I was also in a tremendous amount of pain. The nitroglycerin had worn off. All the pain was raging back. I slowly made my way from the emergency department back to the waiting room. Upon entering the waiting room, my heart suddenly exploded in pain. The room began to spin. I thought I was going to pass out. My muscles began to shake. I collapsed to the ground. I then collected my respiratory equipment and myself from off the floor. I managed to use every ounce of energy to make it 10 more feet out the door to where my mom was waiting in the car for me. I slumped into the car and was grateful I had made it out of the hospital without being hauled right back in. When I arrived home, I rested and tried not to move. My chest was extremely sore. The next day, I called a clinic where I had seen a cardiologist 3 years ago. I was not able to see my cardiologist as he was booked solid, but I was able to see one of his colleagues in a few days. As the days rolled by, the chest pain intensified. I could not often go to sleep because the pain was so bad. And then I'd often be woken up again with severe chest pain and gasping for breath. On the day of the cardiology appointment, I had a little bit of energy, but my chest hurt. I made it to the doctor's appointment. The cardiologist looked at my EKG. He said it was abnormal and noted several more things that were wrong with it than my primary care doctor had mentioned to me. He ordered some additional tests, which are to be completed in about a month. I am to follow up with the physician again in September. I went home from the doctor's office and was feeling very unwell. The trip to the doctor's office used far too much energy. When I was entering my home, I suddenly felt very sick. My head was spinning. My heart was racing. I was nauseous and had a terrible headache. My chest felt as though someone was trying to crush it. The pain radiated to my arm, hand, shoulder, neck, jaw, and back. I collapsed to the ground. I was struggling to breathe. I fought and fought through the symptoms. After 2 hours, my mom called the ambulance. I went for another ambulance ride to another hospital. At the hospital, it looked as though I had the same abnormal EKG. The doctor did a rapid blood test to check to see if I was having a heart attack. That came back negative. He also did a chest x-ray and told me I did not have pneumonia. I was discharged home, even though now I was in more pain than ever and could not sit up without blacking out. Every day the symptoms seem to get worse and worse. I am short of breath and can feel my heart race anytime I do the simplest of things. My chest constantly hurts. I get dizzy and have frequent headaches. Hopefully, the upcoming tests will help my doctor find a cause to all my heart issues. And hopefully soon I can find some relief from all these symptoms. Thank you so much for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe down below. I hope you have a wonderful week and a great day. Bye-bye.